Hi. Wow, I'm sure you guys were really looking forward to this. Not a video essay, but another installment of Colin Talks About Weird Film Things on the Internet. That is right. So today we have a very, very interesting thing. In the past, I've talked about casts, I've talked about other film critics, talking about film criticism, things like that. But today we have two very prominent directors known as the Russo brothers who just very recently gave an interview to The Hollywood Reporter that had a lot of really, really weird takes in it that I would like to cover here today and just talk about because I read the interview and I was befuddled at what was put before me. So let's get into it. So the new film from the Russo brothers, The Gray Man, which is going to be on Netflix quite soon, is currently doing its limited theater run in certain theaters around the country. You can go see The Gray Man, starring Ryan Gosling, and I saw this IndieWire article about The Hollywood Reporter interview, and the headline is, Russo brothers stand by Netflix model. Idea that theater is a sacred space is bullshit. So that is inarguably a very, very inviting and questionable title. So I decided to dig into it, and I found a lot of interesting quotes. Well, let's go over the first one. We're in crisis because everyone's at war with each other. Now, what Russo is referring to here, this is Joe specifically, is the whole streaming versus theaters debate that's been going on amongst directors, people who really enjoy cinema, all executives, everything like that. And here's the thing, I don't really think it's that big of a thing. Sure, theaters are kind of going out of style, but I don't really see people saying, yes, cinema is the definitive way to consume media. Are there certain films that are more made for cinema? Yeah. Are there certain films that are made more to be consumed in a streaming home-like setting? Sure, but does that mean that there's one definitive way to consume films? I don't think so, and I don't think that anyone has really made that argument. So this war that people talk about, I really don't see the traction there. It's sad to see, as guys who grew up loving film. A thing to remember too is it's an elitist notion to be able to go to a theater. It's very fucking expensive, so the idea that was created that we hang on to, that the theater is a sacred space, is bullshit, and it rejects the idea of allowing everyone in under the tent. This to me proves how out of touch people in the Hollywood sphere are, because this simply isn't true anymore. So let's look this up together. How much is a Netflix subscription? As we know, it's been getting higher and higher over time. It's currently minimum $9.99, and then there's $15.49 and $19.99. But minimum is $10. Okay. You have to pay $10 to get Netflix. Sure, you get an abundance of content. It is true, but you don't get but they're specifically talking about releasing new films in this case. So we're not talking about the backstock of catalog that they have of classics and TV shows. We are talking about releasing new films. Do you know how much it is to get AMC A-List? It's like $22 to $25 depending where you are. So that is twice the price, and you can go see 12 films most of the time in a month. 3 films a week, you can go see them in a theater. So while it is more expensive to go to the theater, it is only like $15 more compared to getting relatively non-impressive films on Netflix, as we know their catalog can be very hit or miss, compared to, sure, mainstream releases can be hit or miss, but I don't think that it's so much more expensive at this point to call it an elitist attitude. Also, you need internet in some way. Sure, you could go to a public library and watch, but the idea of watching at home, you need internet. So that either comes from like 4G access, or it comes from broadband internet, and that generally costs a lot. So most of the time, if you put all those factors together, streaming is going to be the more expensive option. So I don't understand where this theater is an elitist idea really comes from. Where digital distribution is valuable, other than what I said earlier about how it pushed diversity, is that people can share accounts. They can get 40 stories for the cost of one story. but having some kind of culture war about whether there's value in that or not is fucking bananas to us. Am I just completely out of the loop here? Because I have no idea what he's talking about, this culture war. The war is about distributing mainstream new releases. It doesn't have anything to do with like the accessibility of Netflix, which everyone would argue is nicer. It's true that it's really awesome that you can basically for one subscription price get the whole family together and watch things, and sharing accounts too. But what's the big culture war here? I guess I can understand maybe on the like most basic level that there is a war on whether streaming or cinema is the way of the future or the way of the past kind of a debate. But what does like the culture war have to do with it? If they're bringing in the expense thing and that's like, oh, you know, it's more expensive, so only the middle class can afford it or stuff like that compared to the lower class who are able to do the streaming. Again, we kind of like disproved that that's a thing. So I don't know what this statement is founded in. Well, Anthony Russo explained that the $200 million The Gray Man was made for a theater. That's how we shot it, how we styled it, and on a technical level, how we supported it. Joe shared that the duo is indifferent to delivery method. When we worked with Marvel, we traveled the world for a decade. What that allows you is an understanding that goes beyond a Hollywood-centric point of view of how to create content. We're agnostic about delivery. You know what might make everybody happy is Netflix starts doing 45-day windows and they have their giant digital distribution platform. Everybody wins. That feels like where it's going. No, that doesn't really make much sense to me. If you are traveling around the world for a decade working with one of the biggest studios in all of Hollywood that will actively cater to your every whim, what does that have to do with distribution? You're getting all of these things your needs acquiesced to because you are with the most giant distribution company in the world. How does that make any sense whatsoever? You know, we something that goes beyond a Hollywood-centric point of view of how to create content, when that's literally all you're doing. That's all you did for a decade was the most Hollywood way of creating content. In regards to the second half of the statement, no, I don't think so. I think where it's going is what they're doing right now, where they do a limited theater run of the film before it comes out, and then it comes out on Netflix, and then that's how it works. It seems like that 45-day window you're talking about is just the limited theater release. I don't see why they would switch it to online specifically. Just a little bit confusing to me. Auteur filmmaking is 50 years old at this point. It was conceived in the 70s. We grew up on that. We were kids. It was really important to us. But we're also aware that the world needs to change, and the more that we try to prevent it from changing, the more chaos we create. It's not anyone's place to reject the next generation's ideas. So I think this is the most baffling quote to me out of this entire interview summation. I am by no means a film studies guy. I've taken like 2 theory courses in college. I'm not big on the knowledge. But even I know auteurism and the idea of auteurism goes way before the 60s into like the 40s with French film critiques. And then Saris in the 60s was the one who coined the term, but also that's the 60s, not the 70s, so you're just wrong. So you very clearly don't know what you're talking about there. So no go on that. And then we move on to the second part of the statement, where they're talking about needing to change and getting in the way. I don't know what that has to do with auteurism. Auteurism is going to be around all the time. Sure, there are filmmakers who can shapeshift and do things really different, and one day make a psych horror that's really gritty, and then another day make like a really awesome comedy. There are people that are able to just completely go between genres and filmmaking styles, but there's always going to be people who make the same movie or the same style of movie over and over again, and that's not a bad thing. That's not like we're halting evolution. Evolution is happening. People are like, as much as I didn't like the film, Everything Everywhere All at Once from the Daniels, really well made and very interestingly made, but also completely different from their first film, Swiss Army Man. There are these amazing filmmakers who are able to completely have their own style, yet completely change things up in like genre and like cinematography and things like that. So what I'm trying to say is, but even older people like Wes Anderson still makes great films. And sure, are all Wes Anderson films very auteur-like? Yes, but that's not preventing progression of cinema. In fact, it's a pretty solid thing to me. So I don't understand why auteurism is getting this really weird, jab from the Russo brothers. I don't get it. We love everything about classic cinema, but we've never been precious about that in any way, shape, or form. How do you get away from the old models? How do you reach audiences that haven't been engaged before? That's all the most interesting stuff to us. Well, Anthony, the answer to that is actually relatively simple, and that is that you make good movies. In fact, let's talk about a film that you produced that I've already mentioned in this video, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Do you know how many people who are not into more artistic cinema have watched Everything Everywhere All at Once because of the noise it got and because of how out there and relatively well done it is? And guess what? That was released in theaters. It was not released in streaming, and people went out to see it. So I don't understand how this ties into the streaming thing and the auteur theory, and it's all just so confusing. Where are you going with this, bud? Disney's gone very conservative. Post Iger, they seem to be in IP management mode. You're going to get all the Star Wars and all the Marvel you can handle for the next decade. They're all changing. It's either a reinforced conservative approach from your traditional studios, or it's forcing a tech company like Netflix to rethink its entire model. But didn't you single-handedly contribute to that? You made some of the biggest Marvel movies of the past decade, and now you're saying, oh, all you're gonna get is Star Wars and Marvel, when that's literally a system that you helped contribute to. Very confusing take, but I mean, they're not wrong, but also what are they trying to say here? Joe Russo continued that Netflix has been easier to work with than a traditional studio, since their approach is more the mentality of a tech company than a studio. They're very hands-off. Nobody bothers you. They have a different approach to how they control the budget on the movie. It's not as stressful as it is at a studio. So I think this is a blessing to the people who are involved in the creation of the films, and a curse to the consumers of the films, because you don't really have to abide by guidelines. You seem to have relatively free reign to do what you want with your film. And then that explains why there are so many stinkers on Netflix, and we get maybe 3 or 4 good films every year. It's ridiculous the amount of garbage that they put out, but it makes sense why, if these directors are being given free reign to do what they want. So I can understand why it would entice creators to Netflix and these streaming services, but also you have to, as a creator, then understand the amount of horseshit that's being put out is very off-putting to people who want to consume films. So that's all that's talked about in the IndieWire article summation. I did read the entire interview, and that would have been far too long to completely cover, but I'm just unsure at what the Russos are doing here. It's like they're trying to completely rebrand themselves after Cherry bombed and flopped and was not good at all, into these streamy guys. We're not a part of the system, even though we were part of the system for the past decade and heavily contributed to the success of said system. Come on, we're like the new hip guys in town. And it's very off-putting to me whenever you see the hello fellow kids, people trying to, fit in with the crowd that's already been there for a while. Just a little bit off-putting to me. I wanted to talk about it. So that is about it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. If you want me to do more of these things where I talk about film news in a more objective way, where it's not just reporting on it and it's kind of giving my take on things, let me know in the comments below. I'm going to be putting out my update on Wednesday about the Patreon and everything else, and just my plan for the future. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you in the next one. Goodbye.